You're now locked into Radio Juxtapoz, the home of contemporary art and culture conversation.
Coming up today.
Yeah, it's a bit funny that we are now so political with our works, as we actually were never the biggest fan of political art. There is like some really smart and good ones, but there's also a lot of propaganda, which, like you say it in German, runs in open doors. So you invite people to your gallery show who are already agreeing and applaud to you, and everyone's agreeing, and you keep your bubble alive.
This is Radio Juxtapoz. We're only just halfway through 2020, but it feels like there's quite a lot to process. We found ourselves here on Radio Juxtapoz consistently reflecting upon the foundations and structures of the art world, on how they might look in the coming years. If I asked you how this past 8 months has impacted your practice or even your thought process, what would your answer be? In today's episode, we're asking similar questions with the German duo Lobros. Christoph and Florian are a pair known for their hypergraphic and saturated aesthetic. Their sharp lines and abstracted shapes feel like they've been lifted straight from the intro to Saved by the Bell. Responding to the May uprising of Black Lives Matter, they've used this as an opportunity to pause and reflect upon their place in the world and the position of privilege that they occupy. For the current exhibition context at Berlin's Urban Spree, they've teamed up with an anti-discrimination group called
Institut für Diskriminierungsfreie Bildung, which basically means Institute for Anti-Discriminatory Education.
Yeah, I thought it was easier for her to say that than me. We'll be talking with Josephine from the group to find out a bit more about the importance of acting upon reflection. So today is a much wider discussion than the pair's influences and studio habits. It's about how we can proactively contribute to the restructuring of old institutions and position ourselves effectively in that fight. If that doesn't sound like your kind of conversation, then don't worry. We have like 40 other episodes where we don't bring up this kind of stuff, so, feel free to jump on one of them. As always, cheers for locking into the podcast. Radio Juxtapoz is hosted by Jux's Evan Preco and myself, Doug Gillen, and is fueled entirely by the love and support that we get from you guys for doing this. So if you enjoy the episodes, then please do let us know. I'm sorry the audio on this one isn't quite as great as we'd like it to be. These group Skype ones are always a bit of a dice roll. I promise we do try to ensure the best quality we can get, but sometimes it just proves a bit tricky. Anyway, enjoy the interview. Guys, it took a few attempts, but we are all here together. Evan, how are you today? I've been talking to these guys for 10 minutes already. How are you?
I'm good. Sorry, it took me a second to get acclimated. We just finished a magazine yesterday morning, so I'm feeling very uplifted and energized. Or tired. I don't know. All of the above.
Lobros, can I get you to introduce yourself individually just for the listeners so that they can tell whose voice is who?
All right, I'm Chris.
I'm Florian.
We're better known as Lobros. We're actually brothers, and we're an artist duo living and working in Hamburg. But at the moment, we're in Berlin.
How often do people ask you, are you really brothers? Is that like just a constant every single time?
Way too often, definitely.
Because you guys have been painting for so many years, it's like, it's a really easy bit of research to do. It's like, it's the first thing that comes up. Is Berlin awake and alive after, the pandemic and the impending doom that we're all facing?
Yeah, it's alive. Maybe a bit too much. We also noticed it's quite hard to keep the restrictions here. When you're outside, have fun with people, and everyone's going a bit wild. Really need to be careful here.
I mean, Berlin is a little wild at the best of times. How's it been for you then? Because you've got a show. The show had been planned for way before COVID, or was it a response?
Yeah, no, it has been planned way before COVID, and then COVID got in between, and in the beginning, we didn't even know, will the show happen? We thought, no, it's bad as this starts here, the show probably will be postponed, and we also plan to do a big thing. the urban Spree is like a big place with this gallery, but also space for concerts and a large beer garden and everything. So we wanted to actually partner up with friends to make like a big party and take over the whole place. But this, of course, got canceled, and then we were kind of in this waiting position till we knew, like, okay, it's going to happen. So yeah, we actually jumped on the COVID theme in the beginning.
And then something else happened, and then it completely changed. So this is like the third incarnation. This is like V3 of your 2020 Urban Spree Festival. So how different does this look to the show that you were originally making?
Quite different, even to get the whole picture. Like we had planned, we had the sketches ready, we're ready for production mode, and then the death of George Floyd happened. To be really honest, like from like German perspective, looking to America, was even like, oh fuck, not again. Thanks to the Black Lives Matter movement to like really like jump on this and go on the streets. Like we had to get the whole story, and we got more and more into it, and felt more and more attached and like really devastated about how this can happen in like also a country that seems to be such a role model for the Western world. And then we start looking at Then we start looking at Germany. Like we have a kind of different situation than you guys. For us, with the Third Reich and all that happened, we like have I think like a self picture of being super like anti-racist. We went through this. Like we did a lot of work on it. We are going to point out the racists and Nazis, and we like as like progressives feel a bit better. Like we're a good person, but in the end, like we have the same or similar racist structures here in our country.
Is this a discussion that you noticed that Germany was having immediately, reflective of its own history, looking at how America was dealing with it? I mean, was this a conversation that you were having with other people, or was it kind of something that was kind of slowly growing?
No, it grew pretty fast, and I think that's also the chance of the times we're living, that like communication is so easy and direct, and plus you have all the recordings from stuff that actually happened. We had a few like right-wing terrorist acts here, so the discussion was already on, but now I think it always get taken into a like, okay, what's about the everyday racism and the racist structures in our country? Like we were on that before, but it definitely got a lot more attention in the media. So there was a big discourse.
One of the most visible things for you, and we kind of just about started touching on this yesterday, is the huge difference that your aesthetic has taken. You know, you've described this show, but visually what happens is, you know, you're a Jule whose entire career has been built on your graphics and your colors and all this kind of like pow, and it's suddenly just become black and white, monochromatic, neutral, and it feels like there's been a huge aesthetic change as well, not just within you know the words that you're saying, but there is. How do you feel about making this? Because it's such a big change for you.
Yeah, maybe as a small introduction to that is that we more often did things like that, but not like that obviously. You know, when we started and getting famous, we had like this detailed characters, and so everyone would know us for like this detailed characters, putting everything in it, no background, so on. And then one point we asked like, okay, what would if we simplify the character? Then we would have to concentrate more on background and composition, blah blah. And so we more often jumped on that, and later on it was like, okay, what if we leave away the character? Then we had this few products, and now it was like also what it. So it's not the big. It is a big change, but we did similar acts before. It's always interesting to us what happens when you leave away the thing you rely on. You know,
in order to focus on something else.
Right.
For the listeners, we went from like color to like monochromatic, grayscale, visuals. And as Chris said, like we are used to like question or way of working constantly, even if though you won't see that drastically as now. And for us, it was like one reaction we could make because we were like so shocked after what happened, and like we want to act, we want to do something. But what can we do with our like artist toolbox? What we have is an account with a certain amount of followers, so we can talk to them. But in order to talk to them, we need to first like really get deep into the subject and read about it, and before we just like shout out something where we also learn you can make so much wrong if you're not really get the point, even if it's like a ongoing learning process. So what we did is like many others posted this black square. We still think it had a certain impact visually on this platform. Hey, something happened, like we're away from normal. Can be only like a little step to get into it. Like when you not have like immediately words or anything, you can post a black square as a first sign of solidarity. But then like the question is what follows. We decided to like after black out our Instagram, we keep on going in black and white and focus on different things. So what we did immediately, we went on protest in Hamburg. We made some like signs that we can like put our skills in or handcraft. Then we also shared some thoughts we had. Yeah, we're also thinking, okay, what to do with our work. We had a lot of stuff we wanted to post actually, but it felt so wrong to like distract from this theme. To get back to the exhibition, we said like, okay, we can't just sit here and work on like a COVID show when something just happened and that triggered us.
I love that the COVID, the global pandemic hit you, but then this thing hit you harder and then kind of took the reign of that. But what made this incarnation of Black Lives Matter, the kind of that conversation, what made that more important than previous ones? Why now?
No, of course, the pandemic is something like there's nothing more extreme maybe, and it's a global thing as racism is as well. But yeah, we also had the feeling we could do more as we're part of this. And of course, we can like listen to the orders, the restrictions we can do to avoid like spreading this pandemic. But it was also like in Germany, the situation got like pretty good, pretty quick. For us, it was more like, okay, there's the lockdown still going, and we had actually also the time for thoughts. I think it was important for many, and I think that's also one thing why so many participated in this protest is that you're more like or less distracted by other things.
Regardless of, I mean, the politics of it are so important, but also there's this thing where we're all so used to, and you're used to in your own studio practice, the bright colors, the vibrancy, sort of the borrowing aesthetic from skate graphics and all these things that we all grew up with and that we love. And then, so when you strip it down to black and white, and when we did the Juxtapoz black and white book last year, a lot of the artists that I didn't mean to plug it, but I will. A lot of the artists that we had in the book didn't primarily work in black and white. So their answers to the questions we asked to them was very interesting to hear how they felt about making work just in black and white, what it made them recognize in their own practice. At what point are you building this body of work and you're like, okay, we have a huge strength in our visual language and our confidence in ourselves that this work actually does work without color? Like, was that just instantaneous, or is that something that kind of took you guys 3, 4, 5, 6 paintings to be like, okay, we're feeling really good about this?
It's kind of hard to answer. I think at the time before, we never thought to paint in black and white again. I mean, we did that far like before low bros in our graffiti days. We tried out a lot of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, we as our work is more about light and shadow actually than colors. We are kind of used to that, and so we took the whole grayscale, and as long as we have that, we can put enough contrast in order to get our work done. And as it's like in this case also more conceptual, something we're heading to, it's also less distracting and more on point on what we want to say.
So within this show, there was obviously your element, the work that you've created, which feels like we've said, you know, the removal of color. It feels like there's a, you know, an aesthetic element of reflection that's going on. But further than that, you decided to create a space that wasn't yours, but an invitation for people to come in, and for people, you know, white people like myself, to come in and to take that idea of reflection even further. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about what it is that you've done here?
So we thought it would be really good to give the people the possibility to have a kind of change of perspective, you know. We were really inspired by a German author and anti-racism coach, Tupoka Ogette. She had this great book, Exit Racism. So that was one of the first books we went through. And so usually what we do is we create art is that we like go a lot from our perspective, our experiences, and then we come with some thoughts and theories. But in this case, we thought it's really good to listen to the experts. A lot of these works are like inspired by her, and we used her expertise to create these artworks. And these are some, for example, like daily situations, you know, where you have the chance to get the view of a black person or a person of color. And yeah, this is one what we actually tried.
Yeah, also something, you know, when we decided to make the exhibition, like we read a lot and heard a lot of like different voices and critics. Also, again, like white artists try to be like have this white savior complex and be like, hey, I fight for the poor or whatever. So we know there were a lot of like pitfalls and mistakes we could make.
We'll be back with the guys in just a minute, but let's check in with Josephine from the IDB to hear a bit more about her involvement in the exhibition. Josephine, can you maybe tell me about the work? What is it that you do?
Mm-hmm. So my colleague and I have founded in German it's called Institut für diskriminierungsfreie Bildung, which basically means Institute for Anti-Discriminatory Education. And we do all kinds of educational work with regards to social justice. So that would entail, for example, change processes, organizational development, facilitating workshops with regards to anti-racism, for example. We work with teachers, we write papers, essays, hold lectures, pretty much everything that basically evolves around the topic of anti-discriminatory education. And most of the times we have a focus. So especially with regards to the last few weeks, I would say it's racism mostly.
Other than racism, what other things are you talking about in terms of anti-discrimination?
Obviously, we work from an intersectional perspective. So we always kind of keep in mind that racism is connected to any other kind of oppression. So we talk about sexism, obviously, we talk about transphobia, we talk about ableism, we talk about adultism. So we talk about all kinds of different scopes with regards to discrimination. And we always try to have a focus point, especially when we start. Let's say we start organizational development with regards to racism. We would have a focus point. So we would start dealing with racism within an organization. So we will look, for example, at hiring processes. We'll look at guidelines, for example. So we will look at different aspects. And I think it's important to have a focus point because I think it's important to kind of have a starting point, so to speak. So you need to get an anti-discriminatory perspective overall. And I think a focus point can be really helpful to that. And I think if you start having that perspective, so if you start having an idea of which kinds of questions to ask, also to have an idea of where do you hold privilege with regards to your own identity, it can be really beneficial, I think, with regards to all kinds of discrimination, because I think it's a perspective that basically you start training at some point.
So where did the connection between you guys come from?
I think it's really funny because I was kind of taken by surprise when I heard of them. Actually, did we meet in 2012? I think so. No, I think
around that
time.
Yeah. So we actually met in 2012. My boyfriend at the time was working with them, and we went to Lithuania, of all places, which sounds really random now. But we went to a festival, and you basically painted in like a huge wall. I remember.
There was like this, how you call it, like this old theater on this festival area, like in the middle of nowhere, where we painted a couple of days, and had a good time.
Yeah, Lithuania is beautiful, by the way.
Tell me then about how you've interacted with this project.
I started a challenge in June. It's really hard to I can't really because it's a very German term, but basically it refers to critical whiteness. So it deals with racism, obviously, and it deals with racism from not necessarily, but in this case, from a privileged perspective. So it deals with racism from a white perspective. And my challenge, I started it on Instagram pretty much, I think, 2 days after quite a few people posted those kind of black tiles after the Blackout Tuesday. I can pretty vividly remember sitting in bed that night and seeing those black tiles and wondering what was up with that. And when I found out, in a way, I was relieved, and then also I felt like it wasn't enough, so to speak. So I was sitting in bed and feeling, okay, this is my line of work, and I feel like there's something I can add to that as well. So basically, I sat down and started writing down a bunch of questions, which led to me holding a challenge on my Instagram channel, which entailed 31 questions with regards to whiteness and white privilege.
What was the kind of objective of these questions?
So the idea was basically to give people, white people specifically, a space to reflect on what whiteness and specifically their whiteness means to them when it comes to an anti-racist agenda. So I think it's really easy to post a black tile, but I think it's really important as well to be very clear about your position. So if you don't position yourself against racism, you are not neutral. I think many people think that, but that's not the case. If you're trying to be neutral, basically, you're keeping the system alive and running. And if that's not your interest, you have to start doing some work. And I think self-reflection is vital to that. So basically, I started writing down a bunch of questions, such as, when did you first realize that you're white? What are aspects or where are situations where you feel you hold privilege? And also, how can you use this privilege for your anti-racist agenda? So I had quite a few questions that touched upon a few different aspects of anti-racist work. That could be, for example, how do you deal with defensiveness, your own as well as your family's defensiveness when it comes to racism? Also, how do you create spaces and amplify the voices of BIPOC? So quite a few aspects were part of that challenge. And I always, and that's important to me, I always try to make clear that that can be a starting point, and that's something you can always refer back to, because I think it's important to write stuff like that down, to write your answers down. So you're able to kind of circle back to that to see where you've been at a few years ago. So yeah, that's pretty much what I did.
So, and this was an actual physical space with these questions on. I know that you have them on your Instagram, but within the Urban Spree, this was a place where they were almost like these questions became exhibits. Were you doing any kind of like data capture with this, or were you trying to like get some of the responses in, or were you just doing it solely for the, for people to kind of keep to themselves?
To me, what is really interesting is the intersection of creativity and resistance. That to me personally is really interesting, because I think resistance is a space of creativity and inspiration and beauty as well. So to me, what is interesting is to see this aspect of my work come to life in a physical space, because I don't really have that very often, which in a way sometimes I pity a little bit, but it was really interesting to me to kind of see that. And what I basically did, and to me, especially as a mom of a very young child, it was honestly really nice to work with you, because it was so easy. We basically sent our stuff over, and and I think the ideas you had were great. So you were working with mirrors, for example, and
that's something you already did
of,
before with these questions, right?
Yeah, not necessarily that question, but the idea, to see your reflection and to kind of think about your reflection.
Yeah, so to get an idea for the listeners, we put a selection of 7 of Josie's questions and put them on mirrors. So you see yourself, you reflect yourself while you're reading. The room is all black, and then opposing the mirrors, we have a bunch of statements from Jule Bönkost. That's the partner of Josie in the Institute. And this is like statements from a white perspective, so white talking to white.
What have been some of the reactions? Have people been generally quite open to this kind of reflection, or has there been some kind of, people pushing back, questioning why they should be in this place to be asked these questions?
I found it really interesting because when I created the challenge and all of the questions, I thought maybe about, let's say, 5 to 10 people would start answering them. But there were, I think, now like more than 3,000 answers on Instagram alone. I think that in and of itself says a lot. But also, I think when I saw the answers, I think people genuinely tried to answer them and to honestly answer them as well. So I was taken a bit by surprise, but then I have to say that because I found it really funny. A friend of mine who's a Black German as well, and who did something similar on Twitter as well. He didn't really write out questions, but he said, "Okay, white people deal with your whiteness. How does it come up in your everyday life?" And when I said I found it so interesting that there are so many white people participating, he's like, "Why? White people like to talk about themselves, and if they can do it in the realm of racism as well, they'll be like, yeah, I'm in." So that was really funny to me. But honestly, I was taken by surprise.
Right. On that note, let's get back to the Lobros.
First of all, it was great to see that even at the opening evening, it was really a push to go on this conversation. And so a lot of people were talking about the issue and the topic. But the one thing that touches me most was the next day, when we were painting the wall and just wanted to grab something from inside. And then Pascal, the owner of the gallery, was like, hey, there's a Black woman crying inside. And like, oh, in a good or bad way, or like how should I? And so she came out with her boyfriend who was white, and Pascal introduced me to her, and she was really overwhelmed by the show, and it was amazing. She was still crying, and I immediately got goosebumps and almost cried. And I usually don't cry that easy, And Pascal sitting there like, oh my God, what's happening? Don't make me cry too. And it was cool to see because she was really taken by it, and her boyfriend. That was that was basically the interesting part. Who was like was really progressive and listening. He had the chance to see in which situations she feels uncomfortable. And also, during this talk, they figured out that he said like, yeah, well, I'm actually at mirror number 5 or whatever was about color blindness. I thought like, yeah, it's maybe better to not talk about the issue, and then it will go away. And she had the chance to talk about her experiences, and then we could figure out like, no, actually, like to be quiet about a problem is not wouldn't guide us to a solution. We first need to point out the problem, figure out where the problems are rooted and how we can change that to a better, that it works better and don't happen again. And then we can continue. And he was pretty open-minded for that. And I think it was even a big help for their relation, that he could understand her way better.
I think as every white person has been going through recently, is perhaps a little bit of uneasiness to tackle these questions, uneasiness to confront their own advantages, because it's a deep dive in some ways. In some ways, it's so obvious. It's like so on the surface. Like, did you feel a little uneasy at any point about tackling this in your show? Like, was there a little bit of like, okay, we could have some backlash, or we could have that issue that I think happens where it's like the white lecturing of other people. Like, was there any worry that you had, like opening night, you're like, this could go the wrong direction of what our intentions are?
Actually, opening night, we felt super confident about the whole thing, but the whole journey to that, it was like a roller coaster ride where in the one moment you felt like, yeah, we're doing the right thing and the works are good like they are. And then like before going to sleep, you're like, oh shit, but what about the won't work? Or do we like, do we do the right thing? Yeah, but it was not because of maybe some like white person being like feeling super attacked or whatever. That's what we rather want to have, or go like into conversation with other white people. But we're kind of afraid also to like touch the subject where like so many people are like kind of forced to live with every day, and we can, as white people, can decide like, oh, we want to take this topic, work a little bit on that, and we can also just like leave it behind and make like go on like nothing happened. And so we're rather concerned about that, about the reaction from the POCs, and like don't step on the wrong foot, because like if we want to step on any foot, it's like from like white to like, hey, see this problem other people have.
What were the things that you might have learned in making this that you feel like you can extend into your practice moving forward, that doesn't just become a one-off? Because I think that's something that, especially since you were working with anti-racism teachers and or instructors, and really doing a nice deep dive into this. But like, what are some of the things that you feel like you can put into your practice that will continue for years?
So definitely learn more about the topic, and we definitely learned that you never learn out on that. And we trying to figure out if we find an organization where we can work together with and get like give our expertise, our network or whatever to help spreading the word.
The thing we ask ourselves, there are like still other topics we want to like work on and continue also like the things we started, but I think like one thing we need to know, like and we can do like all as artists, to be like really aware, like when you, for example, being invited to a group show, to see the lineup and see like, okay, how many like female artists are in there, how many black and people of color are invited, like it's tell the gallerist like, oh, sorry, this is like too white and male for me, for example. So I think it's super important to like not like do cool artworks about the topic, do shows as white people, but also like include BIPOC into the whole process. Also, like
staying on exactly what you've just said. So let's say you get a call this year to go to Miami. Miami's back on. You've been asked to go paint at a festival there, but the whole lineup's white. Is it going to be possible? Are you still going to be able to do it? Are you going to have words?
We will definitely say something.
Yeah.
That at least. As an artist, and also especially in these times, you're not always like so much in charge of being like, oh yeah, pass on this and I take another chance and I'm so like we're like rich so we can do whatever. No, but we did it in the past too, like when we were really like also struggling really on the ground, and there's some project we are not agreeing to, we still said no, and it made us even feel stronger. And I think like to have the feeling as an artist to be in charge, and you're free to decide where to participate. I think it's definitely something you should.
I think this is maybe something artists didn't realize, the kind of the power that they hold, the fact that they, you know, because for many of us, we're just like happy to be invited. You know, we're like, cool, we're making a living off of what we're doing. I'm happy at that. And then now it's like post, 2020 BLM, we are all now more aware of the kind of the cards that we're holding and the positions that we can control and what impact we can make. And I think it starts with things like those.
And also, like, Doug, I think you're getting into the idea as well as the infrastructure of the arts. Like, who are the curators? Who are the people raising money? Who are the people who own the spaces? Like, there's so many parts of the creative life that need improving and more equality, and it'll lend itself to more diverse and more open curations and open programs, so the low bros won't have to say no in Miami to a mural festival or a installation project or anything. And I mean that goes for even Juxtapoz when we do our big projects in Miami. Like I'm totally aware that I'm always need to get better on all those things.
It's an uncomfortable position for us all right now, but the fact that these conversations that we're having just now, that's how we shape, we deal with this discomfort. Because if you're not uncomfortable right now, you're either A, perfect, or B, not paying attention.
It's also something what we always try to do in our art, to always like step a little bit out of our comfort zone. Maybe we don't often see it, but like, is it like changing techniques or whatever? Like we often find ourselves like, why are we like doing this now and not just like keep going as usual? And and also I had to think about what Josephine said earlier about like, art. I don't like. I don't feel I belong there. I don't feel invited. I don't feel like they speak to me. And I mean that must be alarming. We like art to be like liberal, to be free, to be able to point out whatever. But if you see the system behind it, and it is like white privileged people making art for other white privileged people, it seems a little bit weird, that you're like, hey, we have the freedom to do whatever. So I think there are certain limits, at least until we're all quite equal.
In terms of your, and Evan kind of touched on this earlier, but on the aesthetic side, but in terms of your, your brand Lowbros, I wouldn't automatically associate you as one of the most political groups out there in terms of art. Was this part of it kind of nerve-wracking to suddenly enter into the political conversation where you weren't part of it before? Because I think a lot of people will be feeling something relatively similar, where you say the wrong thing, you make the wrong step, and you can be criticized. Before you know it, if you do something wrong, you're afraid you're going to be cancelled, and it's like, oh my god, these guys don't get it. Or the opposite way, when you feel like you've capitalized off of a situation or capitalized off of a moment, a trend, like just doing the black square. But for you guys, was this a little nerve-wracking?
Yeah, it's a bit funny that we are now so political with our works, as we actually were never the biggest fan of political art. There is like some really smart and good ones, but there is also a lot of propaganda, which, like you say it in German, runs in open doors. So you invite people to your gallery show who are already agreeing and applaud to you, and everyone's agreeing, and you keep your bubble alive. Plus, if you do, or what we wouldn't consider as art, would be like slogans, like certain opinions, like put on canvas. But if you can open a discourse with your art and touch political subjects, we are like totally in it. So we first wouldn't consider us as political artists, even though we're like super into politics. But we wanted to keep it a bit out of our art and rather touch like social subjects. What was, for example, really fitting for our show, you might have seen we're still working with our tennis balls. People are like, yeah, why tennis balls? They're just like this cool side object. There's a longer story behind it, because we already touched the subject of privilege. So I was thinking about like 1 or 2 years ago, like also I think it was also in frame of racism, but then like it slowly like the racism part dissolved a little bit, and I think we all, also white people, see like, oh, there are these, like we have privileges, but there are like other white people who have even more privileges. So it was a little bit more about classism when we got to this. Earlier days we used basketball as a symbol for street culture, where we considered ourselves like belonging to, like with all this like graffiti, hip hop, and so on. And so it was a good starting point for us to find the intersection where we can work together. And then we found tennis would be a good counterpart to basketball. As it's like while basketball is more like a team sport, tennis is more like a one-on-one competition thing. You wouldn't have like courts just everywhere. You wouldn't even get in touch when you're not like at a certain social level. So we found it pretty interesting to also take this into our new work, even though it's on grayscale.
Do you think, speaking of sport activities...
Oh, he jumped on that one, didn't he?
No, stop. Hold on, give me a second. I'm not going to go into that too. Do you think that your relationship with skateboarding and the fact that skateboarding is about community, does that the community of skateboarding make you feel a little bit like you have the confidence to speak about communities and kind of coming together for a common good?
I found it pretty interesting when I saw a comment on the barracks saying, oh yeah, we as skateboarders, we're so open to everyone, and doesn't matter whether you're black or white or whatever, and we all stick together. And I need to think about that, and I'm like, yeah, well, but what if there is a black scooter kid or someone else? So discrimination, at least discrimination is like happening. And it's more like a tribalism, you know, like it's more like, oh yeah, if you wear the same tricot, then everything is cool and we come along with each other very well. But what happens if there's someone who thinks differently, or who you know, like is whatever, like does something different than you, and will you accept it the same way? And I don't have the feeling that was always the case when I was skating, and especially when I talk from I think even it got better, you know, that when I was younger and skating, it was normal to be against roller skate or whatever, and like, oh, what?
Sorry.
It was just in, you know, like, and
I mean, it's still okay. It's still okay to make fun of a roller skater every once in a while.
I thought that's why they had the scooter kids.
Super annoying.
I thought the rollerbladers and the skateboarders could unite against the scooter kids. I thought that was their whole thing.
Wait, this is sort of off subject, but like in London or in Hamburg or in Berlin, I know it's a deal in San Francisco. People with like electric skateboards. Has that made its way over to you guys?
Electric skateboards, yeah, from once in a while, but it's more a US thing, I guess. But longboards,
it's more of a tech thing. It's like, oh god.
I mean, talk about Mark Zuckerberg with his electric surfboard and his white painted face. That was hilarious. Let's check back in with Josie one more time to hear her thoughts on where anti-discrimination sits within the law. With regards to this kind of the recent BLM uprising, I mean, obviously, you know, this is a conversation that's been going on way longer than since April this year. But have you seen, especially in the kind of professional capacity that you operate, have you seen a difference in people wanting to engage with this? Or do you think this was all just, you know, kind of, it's a hot topic, it's trending, I'll do this and then I'll dip, and then it's back to business as usual?
Honestly, I think it's a little bit of both. We have quite a few people wanting to work with us. It's gotten really hard to kind of keep up as well. So we get people reaching out to us on a daily basis. But at the same time, I feel like it's also because it's a trending topic, and I can see that coming up in my work in various ways. For example, it's much harder, I think, to work with them. So before that, we used to work with people who had been interested in this kind of work and doing their part as well for quite some time. So they were basically hitting us up and asking us if we could work with their organization or if they could come to a workshop, for example. And that was relatively easy. We didn't have to do too much kind of, I would call it hand-holding, so to speak. But now I think because people have done that from, I would say, kind of desperate place, the work and the emotional labor we have to put in is incredibly high, much higher than it used to be before. So I can see a huge difference with regards not only to our workload, but also with regards to the aspects we have to work at this particular time.
You see a lot of things coming from brands and bigger companies, but then if we break it into kind of responses from the art world, because you kind of sit in between the two, it's a cultural conversation that you're having, which sits within art, but then, you know, you're engaging with corporations, which is, you know, the kind of crossover. But within regards to, especially in Germany, what's that kind of art scene or the establishment doing at the moment regarding this?
I think in Germany, and I think you can speak to that from a different perspective, but I think in Germany, especially for the last few years, we have been very stuck on the idea of freedom of opinion with regards to how art is created as well. So you'll always hear, art needs to be able to say problematic things, basically. And personally, I don't agree with that. I think art can be much more progressive than that, which is why I personally wasn't really interested, or even more, I would say I was bored by the art world. Because I think there's, or what to me is interesting is to kind of see where are the difficulties, where are the moments where you really have to kind of reflect upon yourself, reflect upon what you are doing, reflect upon what you're putting out. How does it relate to the world around you? And the world around you is a political space, if you want it or not, if you're able to kind of reflect on that or not. And this idea of art can be problematic and basically help the status quo, to me, isn't interesting at all, which is why I have never really been involved in the art world at all, I would say.
Just on that kind of thread, do you think that the kind of work that you're doing should be something that should be embedded in legislation, like legally companies have to have an organization to come in and to do this? Do you think that should be something that should be enshrined in law?
I mean, I think it makes sense. I think not enough companies have that. And also, if they do, they have that in a very kind of small capacity. Sometimes they have like one person, let's say for 1,000 employees, and that's relatively small companies. But I think it makes sense, especially in Germany, if you look at different kinds of laws regarding anti-racism, not only anti-racism, but anti-discrimination in general. Specifically with regards to Berlin, which is interesting because there has just been a law passed which basically says that institutions such as schools, the police, and so on and so forth, cannot discriminate, which has been passed, I think, at the beginning of June, which is really interesting as well. So I think if you have those kinds of laws and you're interested in kind of, staying within the law, you obviously need some kind of expertise to be able to do that, because the status quo is problematic and we're socialized in a way that is relevant to discrimination as well. So if we want to work against that, we need expertise with regards to that. So yeah.
I think a lot of people will view Germany, especially being in Berlin, as a really liberal kind of like, really open to these things. How quickly does the attitude change outside of Berlin?
I wouldn't even say that. There are places in Berlin where I am scared to go to. So I wouldn't even necessarily look outside of Berlin. And also what I find really interesting, and you refer to Robin DiAngelo as well. And Robin DiAngelo, interestingly, talks about Germany as well with regards to NS times and the Third Reich. And to me, that's really interesting because she's talking about a critical discourse within Germany when it comes to anti-Semitism. And as a Black German, I cannot agree with that at all. I think, yes, there is a discourse which is, compared to German colonialism, relatively more critical. But still, I think there's so much more work to do, especially when it comes to connecting German colonialism to anti-Semitism, because that's a kind of work that, interestingly, hasn't really been done, which is, to me, specifically really interesting because, for example, the first concentration camp was not founded during the Third Reich, but it was founded in a German colony, which is Namibia today. So quite a few of those aspects, especially, but also people who were colonialists worked for the Nazis later on. So I think it's really important to kind of see how there are shared threats, basically. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily agree that Germany is, so much ahead of anyone else.
I have a question for everybody. Feel free, whoever has an answer first, you can buzz in. When did you first become aware of your whiteness?
Oh my God, yeah.
Interesting question. Yeah, that was the first question from our mirror, and I gave it up at some point because it was really a slow process. I think it came with the subject of privilege, and that you have like certain privileges through your white skin, So like,
I
let
think
it be like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think where we were definitely aware is always every time we travel to the US and you are at the border, how will that work? And we asked ourselves, like, imagine you're from this or that country, or you have this or that skin color from this country. That was definitely something where we thought, like, okay, it's a benefit to be white.
It works going to Europe. It works going to Europe too. Like I've definitely noticed, like it's a lot easier. I would say that because I was a really big baseball fan as a kid, and in America there was a really famous, 1947 was the first time a black player was able to play in the major leagues, the White League. And so I think at a young age, I would say I was younger than 10, I started to realize that there was this huge divide. And there was a huge divide that was still being processed, only 50 years old. And then obviously before that, but in America too, like, it's pretty ingrained in your head as a young person, slavery and the Civil War and Martin Luther King and all the civil rights movement in the 60s. Like there's a lot of things that are, brought to your attention as a young person. And obviously, depending on how you grow up, your parents can let you know that that's, progress is a good thing, or they can let you know that progress is not really the best thing. So I was taught that progress was a good thing. So I think in America, if you have, you find out really early on what your white privilege looks like, because it's so ingrained in our historical kind of lexicon, especially if you grow up in Northern California with slightly more progressive education that is a little bit more open to giving you the truth. I think pretty early, Doug, based on that mirror question.
My question, if it's really what we also learned and where we could find ourselves, is the problem that we as white people see our skin color kind of as a default mode, or as the norm. Why do you really notice other skin colors? So there will be, but you're still saying like, okay, I'm aware like of my whiteness.
Yeah.
But you said like also with privileges and everything. Okay.
I remember the moment I was aware of the systemic differences, because I had been in other places before. But in terms of structure, I remember the moment. And it was funny because I've been thinking about this a lot since the Black Lives Matter sort of uprising. And then when I saw that question, I just thought it fit so perfectly. And it was about 10, maybe 9 years ago or something like that. And I was in London, and I was coming out a party with 3 of my friends, and all of them are black. And it was maybe about maybe 1 a.m. or something like that. And it was before Uber was a thing. And we were standing trying to get a cab to go to another party. And we're standing in the East End of London, a relatively rough area. So it's me and my 3 friends, and we're all wearing kind of stupid costumes with like blood coming down. And I was like, let's get a cab. And they're like, you go. And all 3 of them at the same time were like, you go. And they all hid behind a thing. And I had to stand in the middle of the road on my own, flagging a cab. The cab came, and then I jumped in, and then suddenly my 3 friends jumped in the cab as well. And he started saying things at me, and I was like, no, man, look, it's cool because of money, and then just go. And it was at that moment I realized, I was like, wow, this is like, that's the level that it goes at. Something something as simple as trying to get a taxi after 12 o'clock at night in London. And I think for me, or any of us, to be able to be, I would have been like maybe 23, 24. I don't think there's a single black person in the UK or the US or in Europe that was 24 when they realized that they were black.
Yeah, that's so true.
One of the things that you talked about earlier, which is a whole podcast on its own, and I would actually love to talk to Josephine about this, about the appropriation of techno by white people. Especially in a place where Berlin is so synonymous with techno music, but actually you go to most of these clubs and it's like, wow, okay, why are all the DJs white? Why is the whole crowd white? Why are the organizers and club promoters white when it's black music, and it's always been black music?
Also talking about music and see like white German rappers like not responding at all. Like, okay, especially the younger ones. It's like, okay, wait, like you're definitely not too shy to like put some words out.
Well, I mean, it gets back into what we were saying earlier too about like the infrastructure of the arts needs to change, right? Like there needs to be it's not just the artist. It's not just your responsibility as artists. It's Doug and I's responsibility. It's the curators. It's the people who own the Techno Club. It's everybody's responsibility to know their history and know, and draw the connections in a more based in reality, really.
Yeah, especially if you want to be a part of it as a white person. That's why I think the subject of cultural appropriation is super interesting. Like especially nowadays, where there's such a mix of all cultural influences, and which is super benefiting, like for the art. But I think it's like a lot about the awareness where it's coming from, and the struggle from those people who you take it from. So be an ally in the same way, and it's what I mostly heard from people when there's a discussion about cornrows or whatever. It's not that white people wouldn't never be allowed to do that, but acknowledge where it is coming from and maybe help to fight.
And to listen if someone tells you that something is offensive or it's wrong or whatever. Whether something stupid is wearing dreadlocks or cornrows, or whether it's, whether you're with your friends and it's, hey, it's just me, it's just us guys, I can say the N-word and it's okay because there's nobody else around and nobody else can hear it. It's actually, if somebody of color tells you that this is wrong, it's okay, just listen, don't fight it, just take that. I feel like there was something different here. I feel like that moment in when this happened in the summer, it felt like there was it felt like the first time when I was having these conversations without there being a person of color present. And that was different. I wasn't having these conversations as much before.
I would say, Doug, I think one of the reasons is that, I think it's twofold. One, I think that when you have, I guess, quote, the leader of the free world being an open white supremacist, that the stakes, the tension gets higher. And also when the entire world is supposed to stop and everything about our daily lives was supposed to be kind of altered, and we were supposed to all be sheltered in place and caring about, everyone's health. Black people were still being killed and harassed on the streets by white people and white cops. That consistency was so real that I think it had to boil over to really finally just when the greatest pandemic of our lifetimes is happening and cops still is killing a black person for no reason on the streets. I think it makes everybody go fuck, okay, this is it just has to. If we can't change now, what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah, no, I think the key to this whole thing is the pandemic. I think that is the reason that people listened more than anything. I think it was because of the pandemic, because it's not like the whole black community in the Western world just went, hang on guys, we can't talk about this just now until it's 2020. Remember we signed the deal. We'll wait until it's 2020 to bring this up. And they hadn't been saying before, they've been saying relentlessly the whole time, but then all the things were in place that made it now was the right time for us to listen, for us to be oh shit. And I think you hit that completely on the head earlier when you said that there was time for you to have this point of reflection. There was a pause.
Yeah, I'm just reading a book about altruism, and it says the same, that during crises, the level of altruistic behavior raises. The people are more with themselves and trying to help where it's needed, and look at each other and take care about each other.
Oh, I was gonna ask, and it's for everybody in this conversation, is how do we, as we make our attempts to be more open-minded and more conscious of our privilege, or more conscious of how the world is operating around us, how do we not cannibalize good intentions? Because I feel like everybody wants to criticize, even if you're trying to learn. You guys had an art show where you're an attempt to create a dialogue and to improve, improve your audience perception of themselves, improve your perceptions of yourselves in the art world. And yet we tend to criticize even those attempts. And how do we get to a point where we are not constantly cannibalizing good intentions and having productive conversations in that. And I think social media really ruins it. I mean, it makes it really hard, but I just want to hear your opinion on that.
It makes it hard. Yeah. It's a different kind of discourse in social media. But I think it is very important that that you get criticized, like when you do the step. And that's a bit the dilemma for us white people. Like we have to act. We don't want to be silent, but if we do so, like we're like easy to attack and easy to make mistakes. But I think like it's on us to, like what Doug said earlier, to get out of this comfort zone and deal with it.
Yeah.
Because it's like we might gonna get criticized, but like let's not be defensive. Let's let our egos a little bit behind and try to like learn from that and go further. Like until we make less and less mistakes with that. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I think it helped. It helped me personally a lot when I just read I don't know what it was, like a post from someone pretty much saying like that you can't do it right, but not doing anything is the wrong way. So which means like you need to do something, and even if you follow your nose, and let's talk about why it is wrong and why it is or what is good about it, what's bad about it, what could we do better. It's almost better than doing nothing. It's every time better than doing nothing.
So is this a permanent change for you guys? What does the future of Lobros look like?
No, visually they're like we will never be stuck. Like we're always developing. We have so many ideas. I think we definitely changed in a certain way to be more aware of this topic, and you can't like unsee it after you got like so deep into it, and that's a good thing. So we still be sensitive for the subject, even though like in our art we will also get on a different track, but we kind of like the option now. Like we played a lot with typography in our work, so that's we have the feeling a good add-on with like some things you can hardly put in words and other things you can hardly like visualize in your painting. Yeah. So there will be a lot of changes.
I just want to ask, because we kind of mentioned it yesterday, even though we had a little technical difficulty. But are you guys missing the travel, or are you kind of happy that you've had a little bit of a break?
Yeah, we were definitely happy about this little break in the beginning. I think something a lot of people were looking forward to, like to slow down a little bit, and we somehow wondered why it's not possible for me, like to, for example, like travel half a year to South America, and then I come back and I see like, oh, everyone's like already like on. I need to like keep up. So we kind of forced to keep the pace all the time to synchronize with others. So the fact that like everyone had to slow down felt, I think, like except for those who are like not in that privileged situation we are, to be able to slow down. It was definitely a good thing to focus on really important things, and it's something we usually do anyway. So to always take some time to like get into ourselves, like reflect also our work. It easily happens when you like do a non-stop traveling. You also have to like put out ideas constantly, and different from a show. It's like you usually never know what kind of wall format you get, so you need to like adapt to that and be pretty spontaneous in your creative process. So then it can also happen that you get kind of like blind for what you're doing, because you're reproducing like the stuff you do all the time. So these little breaks are anyways like always good for us. And for the question, if we miss the traveling, yeah, a lot, like especially like certain places, but it's more about the people, I guess, like to reunite with people. And apart from that, we also like pretty much like to just jump in the car and get to Berlin. Then we had a little thing in Greifswald to get together with our crewmates. Then got back to Berlin to set up our exhibition. And yeah, we're also looking forward to like discover Europe a little bit more. Now it's a challenge.
Well, I miss you guys. I miss all of you. I even thinking about not having Miami, doing Basel installations with you guys for 2 years. Just, I know it's good for everybody, but also it's sad to know that we won't be doing it this year. So
this is not the interview we would have had a year ago.
Yeah.
A year ago we would have been like, so tell me, what was your favorite 90s comic?
I'll never forget being in your studio in Berlin, listening to Small Town Boy dancing at like 3 or 4 a.m. I'll never forget that.
Thanks again to Josie, Christoph and Florin for sitting down with us. This was a slight departure from our usual format, but we figure an arts podcast is as important place as any to further these conversations. If you are in Berlin, then be sure to head down to Urban Spree before the 6th of September to check out the show. If you're listening to this from far into the future, then, just thanks for checking in. Evan and myself will be back with you guys real soon. Till then, as always, look after yourselves and each other. Peace.